For most of the 20th century, the American diner operated on terms that needed no advertisement. A counter, a stool, and coffee that arrived before anyone asked. It was open at 3 in the morning when nothing else was, which meant it served factory workers, traveling salesmen, and night shift workers with equal indifference to who they were. 5 of those places are gone, not merely closed, but erased, absorbed, or dismantled. Each one fed millions of Americans across multiple decades, and each one disappeared gradually enough that most people only noticed once the buildings were already gone. In 1876, Fred Harvey reached a verbal agreement with the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad to feed its passengers, a straightforward arrangement that addressed a problem no one had managed to solve. Before Harvey, rail passengers had 20 minutes at each stop to eat whatever a bartender happened to be serving. Operators charged for meals that had not yet arrived. When the train whistled, passengers left hungry, having paid for food they never received, and this was the norm, not an occasional abuse. Harvey opened his first lunch counter inside the Topeka, Kansas train depot in 1876. The coffee was fresh, the produce locally sourced, and the pie crusts, according to one newspaper of the day, were feather light. Travelers began planning itineraries around being in Topeka at mealtime. When Harvey died in 1901, he was operating 45 restaurants and 20 dining cars across 12 states. His sons continued building. By the 1920s, the Fred Harvey Company ran 84 dining establishments along the Santa Fe Railway. Meals arrived on imported linens with silver table service. Men who arrived without a jacket could borrow one, dark alpaca coats, kept at every location for exactly that purpose. The women who served were known as Harvey Girls, paid $20 a month plus room and board, better than most school teachers earned at the time. What Harvey built offered them genuine economic independence, and it also controlled where they slept and who they could speak with after hours. The 1946 MGM musical starring Judy Garland made the Harvey Girls the most famous waitresses in American history. The record is more complicated than the film. After World War II, the federal government funded highways and airports while directing nothing toward the railroads. Passenger rail declined, and the Harvey houses declined with it. The Alvarado Hotel in Albuquerque, built in 1902, was torn down in 1970 for a parking lot. The company was sold in 1968. The last Harvey house built, the La Posada Hotel in Winslow, Arizona, completed in 1930, was nearly demolished in 1994 before a local preservation effort saved it. Today it operates as a hotel on Route 66. It is one building out of 84. On December 22, 1888, Joseph Horn and Frank Hardart opened a 14-stool luncheonette in Philadelphia. 14 years later, after Horn had traveled to Berlin and witnessed a restaurant concept untried in America, they opened the first Horn and Hardart Automat at 818 Chestnut Street, machinery from Germany, an interior of marble, stained glass, and brass. A customer deposited a nickel, a small window opened, and a meal appeared. The first New York Automat opened in Times Square on July 2, 1912. At its peak, the company served 800,000 customers daily, making it, for a period, the largest restaurant chain in the United States, operating exclusively in Philadelphia and New York. Coffee was 5 cents from 1902 until 1950, when inflation pushed it to a dime. Longtime customers noted the change with considerable displeasure. A full meal cost under $1 through the 1950s. What distinguished the Automat was less its machinery than what that machinery produced, a space where social class had no practical bearing on who sat where or ate what. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, recalled average people sitting next to women in fur coats, both eating the same creamed spinach. Wilson Goode, Philadelphia's first black mayor, credited the Horn and Hardart at 15th and Market as the place where the city's black political movement was born, describing it as a nice place where African Americans could go and feel dignified. In the 1950s, middle-class families moved to the suburbs. Horn and Hardart's model had no mechanism to follow them. In the 1970s, the company began replacing Automat locations with Burger King franchises. The last Horn and Hardart, at 200 East 42nd Street in New York City, closed on April 9, 1991. Its vending machines were carted away without ceremony. The physical Automat does not exist anywhere in the United States. White Tower Hamburgers was founded in 1926 by John and Thomas Sachs, a father and son who had studied White Castle operations before opening their first location near Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. By 1929, they had 30 locations in Detroit alone. Despite the Depression, the chain expanded to 130 locations, positioned near train and trolley stops to serve factory workers and daily commuters. The 5-cent hamburger held at that price until 1941. White Castle sued White Tower in 1929 for copying the name, building design, and menu. White Castle won. In being forced to modernize its architecture, White Tower arrived at the Art Deco style that defined it at its peak of 230 locations in the mid-1950s. The manufacturing economy that sustained those urban locations began contracting in the 1950s. Workers left the cities, and the transit lines that ran past White Tower counters emptied with them. The chain had no model for the suburbs. By 1979, only 80 company-owned locations remained. The founding family shifted focus to franchising Burger Kings. Robert Toney, who had spent his adult life managing White Towers in southern New Jersey, purchased 4 Camden locations in 1981 and ran them under the name Roney's until he couldn't. The last independently operating White Tower in Toledo, Ohio, ran for 96 years. In April 2022, a fire destroyed the building. In the late 1920s, a Houston lumberman named J.C. Stedman was building small prefabricated cottages for neighborhood businesses when someone suggested he convert one into a diner. He brought the idea to Memphis, where he connected with James Frederick Smith, the father of the man who would later found FedEx, who had the capital to expand it. The chain's name came from a child watching one of the prefab structures loaded onto a truck. It wobbled. The kid said, "Look, Ma, how that little house toddles." Stedman was standing nearby. Every toddle house was the same, a brick cottage, painted white with a blue roof, containing 10 stools at a stainless steel counter and no tables. The pies, chocolate cream, black bottom, pecan were what customers came back for. By the 1950s, the chain had more than 200 locations in nearly 90 cities. Customers paid by depositing the correct amount into a glass box by the door. When the Evanston, Illinois location replaced the glass box with a cash register in 1945, regular customers treated it as a personal affront. The drop box had not been about efficiency, it had been about trust. Toddle House operated under Jim Crow. In 1946, the company opened a parallel chain called Harlem House for black customers barred from toddle houses. In December 1963, 21 people were arrested in Atlanta for demonstrating outside a toddle house that refused to serve black customers. The chain's resistance to integration damaged it before the Civil Rights Act of 1964 compelled a change. Joe Rogers, Sr., had worked as a Toddle House manager for years. When he was denied an ownership stake, he left. In 1955, he founded Waffle House. Waffle House still names one of its omelet preparations after its predecessor. In 1961, Dobbs House purchased Toddle House for $18 million, the largest transaction between two Memphis businesses in the city's history, and converted the locations to other brands. The Steak and Egg Diner in Washington, D.C., occupies a former Toddle House structure, 10 stools, a stainless steel counter, a small brick cottage painted white with a blue roof. In 1925, Howard Deering Johnson borrowed $2,000 to buy a corner pharmacy in Quincy, Massachusetts, and almost immediately the soda fountain became the store's most profitable section. The ice cream he developed had roughly twice the butterfat content of other commercial varieties, and he eventually settled on 28 flavors. "I thought I had every flavor in the world," he said. "That 28 became my trademark." The number appeared on the buildings, the napkins, the placemats, and on the license plate of his black Cadillac HJ28. In 1935, he sold the rights to use his name and recipes to a local businessman named Eugene Sprague to run a second location in Orleans, Massachusetts, an arrangement that became the template for restaurant franchising in America. By 1939, 107 Howard Johnson's restaurants lined the East Coast highways. By 1975, the company operated more than 1,000 restaurants and 500 motor lodges in 42 states and Canada. Interior designer Sister Parrish, who would later work on the White House, designed the restaurant interiors in the 1930s. She dressed the waitresses in aqua, did the walls in aqua, and later told the New York Times she had never used that color since. The chain survived World War II, when rationing reduced it to 12 operating restaurants. The 1973 oil embargo struck hard because 85% of revenue came from highway travelers who stopped coming when gasoline became scarce. Management cut costs rather than reinvested. In its later years, one location offered only vanilla ice cream. The freezers for the other flavors were broken, and no one repaired them. In 1985, Marriott Corporation acquired the company, primarily for its real estate and motor lodge brand. The last Howard Johnson's restaurant closed in Lake George, New York, in 2022. 5 places, hundreds of millions of meals, a marble Automat in Manhattan, a 10-stool cottage in Memphis, an orange-roofed restaurant on the New Jersey Turnpike, a railroad lunch counter in the Kansas High Plains, and a 5-cent hamburger counter in Milwaukee, all of them gone now, or reduced to a single surviving structure. 2 developments, arriving together, ended the independent American roadside diner. Interstate highways bypassed the towns where those places had been built, and fast food chains filled the interchanges the interstates created. The small operator with 10 stools and a pie case could not compete on price, could not expand without capital, and had no model for following customers to the suburbs. The closings came without announcement. A door locked one morning, and the routines, the regulars, and the recipes were gone by the next. In Quincy, Massachusetts, a plaque marks the site of the first Howard Johnson's restaurant. In Winslow, Arizona, the La Posada Hotel still serves dinner. In Washington, D.C., a stainless steel counter in a small brick cottage with a blue roof is open for breakfast. The last time you ate in a place like that, a counter diner, the kind with pie in the case and coffee that came without being asked, you probably didn't know it was the last time. Nobody ever does.